nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello, thanks for joining us. Alberta's Health Minister Tyler Shandro announced that our province will begin lifting COVID-19 measures in continuing care facilities across the province. Shandro says it will be a two-phased approach, easing remaining measures across Alberta. The first phase will lift remaining visitor restrictions, current limits to dining and recreation activities, outbreak protocols, single-site staffing, and other measures will remain in place for now. Shandro says there are currently only 6 active cases in the continuing care facilities across the province. Facility operators have until July 31st to implement the changes. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney was spotted flipping pancakes early this week in Calgary at a Stampede breakfast. When asked afterwards during a scrum, Kenney told reporters Alberta will have nothing to do with vaccine passports, saying the province has been cleared that it will not be bringing in or accept passports to prove vaccination against COVID-19. Quebec has said vaccine passports will be needed starting in September to get into non-essential businesses in the province's COVID hotspots. Manitoba has been issuing proof of immunization cards to residents who are 2 weeks past their booster shot, but the Alberta Premier says vaccine passports would contravene the Health Information Act.
We've been very clear from the beginning that we will not facilitate or accept vaccine passports, and that in fact we regard, I believe that they would in principle contravene the Health Information Act and also possibly the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. We also amended the Public Health Act to remove the 110-year-old power allowing Alberta to force people to be inoculated. So these folks who are concerned about mandatory vaccines have nothing to be concerned about, and there will be no vaccine passports in Alberta.
Alberta's opposition leader Rachel Notley says the United Conservative Party needs to do a better job working with our province's agricultural sector, including providing more support for farmers and producers to build or upgrade barns to be more energy efficient and cheaper to operate.
I think that this government has surprised even their strongest supporters with the degree to which they take for granted the people of rural Alberta, the people who live and work in rural Alberta. Whether you're talking about policing, whether you're talking about municipal infrastructure, whether you're talking about taxes, whether you're talking about supporting agricultural researchers, every time you turn around, this government is taking another run at rural Alberta. And they haven't done enough to support the agricultural industry. Our agricultural industry has always been one of the mainstays of our economy, and it has the potential to continue that way and, in fact, to create more jobs and diversification in the process. And so we need to be more forward-looking, and this is one of many ways in which we can do that.
The president of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms is taking a leave from the Calgary Advocacy Group. In a media release this week, the board for the Justice Center says John Carpay is taking an indefinite period of leave of his responsibilities at the Justice Center and will appoint an interim president to serve in his absence. This stems from an incident in which Carpay hired a private investigator to follow a Manitoba judge. Court of Queen's Bench Chief Justice Glenn Joyal says that he's deeply concerned that he was followed by a vehicle recently with the intent to find him breaking health restrictions. The board said in a release, "We had no prior notice of the plan and were not consulted on it. Had the board been advised of the plan, it would have immediately brought it to an end." Mr. Carpay has acknowledged that he made the decision unilaterally. John Carpay has since apologized for the decision, saying it was bad judgment to follow the judge ruling on a case involving the Justice Center. The Justice Center has been representing a number of churches in their fight with the Manitoba government during the pandemic over provincial health orders. It appears that Alberta's Justice Minister may not disband the Lethbridge Police Service after all. The Lethbridge Police Commission says they've received a letter from Minister Casey Madu in response to their submission of a revamped action plan for the Lethbridge Police Service. In the response to the plan, Minister Madhu writes, quote, "I am pleased that the combined action plan outlined various actions and strategies that I am pleased to say address my concerns and set a positive and encouraging path forward. I appreciate the steps already taken by both the LPS and the LPC as well, which are outlined in the action plan," end quote. This spring, Madhu had ordered LPS to submit to him an action plan addressing many of the issues that have tainted public perception of the Lethbridge Police, or else he would consider dissolving the service. Coming up, we hear from a retired doctor about a potential health care crisis in the province. Stay with us. We'll have more right after the break.
You've got a system of frustrated patients. You have a system of frustrated physicians and surgeons.
Welcome back. The United Conservative government in Alberta ended its long-standing master agreement with the province's doctors and put new rules in place that began April 1st. Changes include new fee rules on extended patient visits, which doctors have indicated will devastate the bottom line for some family and rural practices. As a result, an increasing number of physicians are retiring or leaving Alberta, which in turn is leaving many Albertans scrambling to find a new doctor. Earlier this week, I was joined by a retired Dr. Dennis Madry, who weighed in on the issue. Take a look. Now, Dr. Madry, we're hearing about doctors leaving Alberta. This, of course, is putting patients in quite a situation, as some are left without physicians at all. Can you maybe give us your opinion on the current business climate doctors are facing in Alberta?
You know, physicians are not unlike any other profession. We want to be able to provide, as physicians, diagnostic and therapeutic services to our patients in a way in which it meets with your individual lifestyle and it meets with your requirement for remuneration. For many physicians and surgeons, they've not actually been able to provide the care that they wanted to provide because the system has been flooded with individuals with COVID-19.
Yeah, definitely. Now, we recently heard about the possibility of budget cuts to nurses' wages. So how have previous cuts hurt doctors?
It's hurt them by virtue of not being able to provide services to their patients, which is frustrating. Then they get complaints from patients and their families that they're not getting it seems as though their physician is responsible for not providing the care, but it's really the system that's the problem. And this has been a fundamental problem for a long time. Physicians and surgeons want to be able to provide their service and be fairly remunerated for it. But the system itself is constrained by the 5 tenets of the Canada Health Act. Canada is the only country in Western civilization that restricts consumers, that is patients, from accessing private health care, except for North Korea. But every other country permits an opportunity for physicians and patients to access or provide care in 2 different systems. Competitiveness is a great tool for improving the accessibility and the quality of care and controlling costs.
So then, Dr. Madry, do you think there's a better way that our healthcare system could operate?
The way the system operates is very expensive to the taxpayer, and there are tremendous opportunities to improve access to the system, improve or maintain, at least maintain quality, and reduce costs. But at the same time, maintaining fair and appropriate wages for not just physicians and surgeons, but also the nurses as well. The nurses are not overpaid, for example. But the system, the way the system operates, is so inefficient, and there are inefficiencies at every level, right from government administration to hospital administration through physicians, nurses, surgeons, paramedical, technical, and even patients themselves create inefficiencies and unnecessary costs to the system. So this is could be a tremendous opportunity to look at how the system could be re-engineered in a way in which Medicare is preserved, but choice is given to the public and to the providers in terms of access to health care, the quality of health care that's provided, and the costs. I just think there's tremendous opportunities, and we bury our head in the sand when we're unwilling to look at new models that have proven to be less costly, more effective in other international jurisdictions. And I think it's over time that we do that.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Dr. Madri. It was very interesting to get your take on that. We appreciate having you on today.
You're very welcome.
Up next, we speak with a student from the University of Lethbridge who's part of a research team that may have an answer to eliminating COVID. That interview is coming up right after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. For the past year and a half or more, we've been hearing about nothing but COVID-19, and now the talk is all about vaccines. Vaccine manufacturers are now suggesting we may have to get a yearly booster to stay safe from the virus. But what if there were another form of medication, like a pill that you could take to clear your body of the COVID virus if you caught it? Could this possibly eliminate the need for vaccines? In a previously recorded interview, I had a chat with DJ Kim, a biochemistry master's student from the University of Lethbridge, who's working on the research to invent such a medication. Take a look. Let's talk about the research you're doing at the U of L. It sounds really interesting, but how does it relate to COVID?
So we're trying to investigate how COVID interacts with the human protein. So we target the COVID protein that is has a function of proofreading and protecting. So without this protein functioning properly, the virus will make a lot of mutation on their when they're replicating themselves. As you kind of heard from news that there's some mutation in the COVID variant sounds a little scary, but once we kind of target this protein, COVID makes a lot of mutation, which will just essentially the COVID cannot survive by itself.
So if the virus mutates too much, you're saying it can't survive?
Yes.
Okay.
So all the viruses have a very specific genetic codes in their in themselves.
Yeah.
But if there's a lot of mutation happen, they just cannot survive.
Okay, so what is it that your research is doing that's helping to prevent that from happening?
We're forcing them to have more mutation so that they just die off by themselves.
Interesting. So how do you do that?
So for us, we're just get the COVID protein from E. coli, and then we just make a lot of it, and then we're just trying to get the structural information of those protein, and then our collaborating institutions will continue on with designing the inhibitors of the COVID.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Now, is this something that would be used in a vaccine?
No, it's totally different from vaccine. Vaccine is you grow your immune system by adding the vaccine materials. Where this thing is if you have a COVID, if you're infected by COVID already, then we're adding this inhibitor to stop the growth of a COVID in your body.
That's
so
fascinating.
it's more like a medicine that you take when you have fever.
Okay, and would it be in the form of a pill or something?
For now, we cannot really tell because we're just doing very preliminary research so far. But in the end, we're probably expecting more like pills or something that we digest. I think. Yeah.
So this is something that could actually avoid vaccines altogether. So if somebody were to get COVID, they could take this medicine, and what it does is it causes the virus to mutate too much so that it basically dies off.
Yeah, that's what we were trying to do, but we certainly don't recommend people to not take vaccine because the name itself is severe acute respiratory syndrome, which is not a good thing.
Now, you'd mentioned that there's collaboration with other universities. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I know you're in the preliminary stages and everything.
So far, we just have a lot of collaboration with the not only in Canada but outside of Canada, such as England or USA, and then those people have a better equipment to perform the further research. So that's why we are doing collaboration with the other institution. Yeah, there's some limitation in Canada.
Okay, and this started in Dr. Patel's biochemistry lab, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, my understanding is Dr. Patel's lab is quite the center for a lot of this research that's coming out of Lethbridge. It's amazing. The work that you guys are doing is really impressive, and I wish you guys the best of luck with that. Absolutely. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, take care. All the best to you, DJ. Take care.
Okay, thank you very much.
Some fascinating research coming out of the University of Lethbridge. Well, next week we'll bring you part 2 of that interview with a U of L postdoc student who's helping to find a cure for hepatitis B. Up next, the greatest outdoor show on earth has resumed once again. We tell you how that's going and what's changed about it. Stay with us. With the announcement of Alberta's Open for Summer plan, so too is the greatest outdoor show on earth. Communications manager Christina Barnes joined me this week to discuss the Calgary Stampede. Christina, thanks so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
So how did you have the lead time to prepare for all of this? And since the Premier's announcement to have Alberta reopen for business as of July 1st, how much heads up did the organization have that Stampede was going to be a go this year?
We always start immediately after the previous Stampede. Knowing last year there wasn't a Stampede, we did start planning in the fall. And also those plans were built to be adaptive, to be flexible, knowing that we were going through a pandemic. We knew that we would certainly most likely have restrictions in place. Not knowing what those restrictions might be, we needed to have plans that could flex and adapt based on the situation. So going through May, June, July, or into July, we started to get a better indication of what that might look like when the province announced its plan for reopening. So that was really, where we really could start to set plans in place with that flexibility that we had.
Okay, so how different does the Stampede look this year compared to other years? Or is there a difference? What can people find when they go there?
I would say the biggest difference coming into Stampede Park is that things are laid out differently. So there's certainly room to roam. There's a lot more space on park, about 25% more open space. So greatest rides that the Midway has, they're here. The best food, the best games, all of those things are laid out in our Midway and our agriculture area. They're just laid out a little differently. We do have some capacities in some of our venues. So the Western Events Center would be a 50% capacity. Our Stampede Grandstand for the rodeo and evening show would again be a 50% capacity. And for that, we've given people the option of booking their tickets in areas that fit their comfort level. So they can choose a more distanced zone of seating. So you're sitting a little further away from other people, or you can choose to be right sort of in the heart of the action with a lot more people. So again, it's choosing those experiences that are right for you. And then we've got our music experiences, which are always so popular at Stampede. We've had the opportunity to book Canadian artists, all Canadian lineup. Great things do come out of the pandemic, and this is one of them. So our Stampede summer stage is all outdoors. So, people are just sort of sitting on the grass and enjoying the music. Nashville North is a very popular, the nightlife of Stampede Park. The venue is different. It's a canopy instead of a hard-sided tent. And we do have a process that people need to go through to come into that venue, which is either to show a proof of vaccination or to take a rapid test. Just again, that extra level of comfort. If people want to come, enjoy that live music experience, dance, be with their friends, they're coming in and they're knowing that people are either vaccinated or have passed a COVID test.
So how are you able to monitor and enforce this? Is it just that people have to show their vaccination records?
When you want to go to Nashville North, so that's the only venue on Stampede Park that would require this process.
Great.
When you want to go there, you go through the lineup for rapid testing. So we've got 4 spaces to do that. So at 3 of our entrances at Stampede Park, you can choose to do it right away or right by Nashville North. And you either take a picture of your vaccine records, or if you've got the physical paper, whatever is easier, all you need to do is show that. The other option is to do a quick rapid test. So maybe about a minute once you get through the lineup to show your vaccine paper, or you do the rapid test, which is about 25 minutes to get the results back on that. We have found that about 70% of people are choosing to show proof of vaccine. The other 30% are going with that rapid test. And we know Nashville North is a very popular venue, and everyone in the lineup really does seem to understand and appreciate what we're doing, even if it does take a little bit of extra time to go through that process first.
How many people are you expecting this year compared to other years? Do you think there will be a difference? Do you think some people are a little hesitant to still come out?
There absolutely is a difference. It's a transition time for people as they get more used to being out in public, going to live events. We are expecting about half of what we would normally see in an average year. In the past, I think our attendance numbers have been seen as a sign of success. Look how many people came to Stampede Park. But I think for this year, it's look how many people had an amazing time at Stampede Park. We know it will be fewer people, but it's an experience, that some people are not ready for, but we do know there are a lot of people that are ready for it and have been down here at Stampede Park enjoying it already.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, and we wish you a happy Stampede, of course.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Christina Barnes is the communication manager of the Calgary Stampede. Coming up after the break, we bring you some of our top local stories from around southern Alberta. Stay with us. Welcome back. The family of Lane Tailfeathers is pleading for anyone to come forward with information that could help them find him. Tailfeathers has been missing since last month and hasn't returned to his home in Fort Macleod. As Micah Quinn explains, his family says they haven't been able to sleep at night knowing that he's still out there and missing.
Please, if any of you know where my brother is, please just bring him back to us or tell us where he is so we can bring him home.
For Billy J. and Stephen Heavy Shields, it's been a tough few weeks not knowing where Lane Tailfeathers has been.
I'm worried for my family and just how I see them, how they haven't been sleeping well and, waking up all hours of the night. And it's just been really hard on the whole family.
The Fort Macleod RCMP released a statement saying that the man was reported missing by his family on June 20th.
The last time I seen him was in front of my place. He was walking into town. He had torn pants, the styles they wear nowadays, a white t-shirt.
The family has set up a Facebook group for anyone who might have information on Tailfeathers.
We made a group on Facebook called Help Find Lane, Wild Horse Rider. That is his Indian name. We made that group just for updates and to people that want to offer their help or just any kind of ideas or even any information if they want to put there, anonymously even. That's kind of what we did the Facebook page for, and also to provide pictures, to put pictures up there of him and just for support.
Bridge City News reached out to the Fort Macleod RCMP for comment on the missing persons case, and they told us the case is now being handled by the Major Crimes Unit in Edmonton. We reached out to them for comment, but didn't hear back before our broadcast deadline. If you have any information that can help police with their investigation, Call Crime Stoppers right away at 1-800-222-8477. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Thank you, Micah. Lethbridge this week, City Council voted 8-1 to have residents vote on a ward system, which could begin in 2025. The question on the October 18th municipal ballot would read, do you support using a ward system to elect city councilors starting with the 2025 municipal election? Lethbridge City Council is currently elected at large, meaning that 8 councilors and 1 mayor serve an entire city. A ward, on the other hand, is a local authority area or electoral district within a municipality. A Lethbridge woman with a large facial birthmark is bringing awareness of her rare condition to Canada and to the world. BCN's Naveen Day has the story.
Chelsea Pete was born with a venous malformation known as Sturge-Weber syndrome. It is a rare disorder characterized by the association of a facial birthmark called a port wine stain birthmark. She says the condition has made cause for many hospital trips throughout her life.
I was having multiple procedures done. I had life-saving brain surgery as a baby, multiple eye surgeries for my glaucoma in the left eye, as well as laser treatments for my birthmark, which are extremely painful. If anyone's ever had a tattoo removed, it's the same type of pulse dye laser.
Although not contagious, the condition has caused negative public reaction towards her all her life.
People would ask my mother, for example, while out shopping if she needed help escaping an abusive relationship because they thought this was abuse. Middle school was extremely hard. There was actually even an instance where I had a group of girls make a Chelsea Haters Club. High school wasn't much better. I didn't have that date for grad. Dating was not an aspect. You know, people are very scared of someone who looks scary like me.
Pete recently began connecting with other adults with facial differences to hear their stories, and she advocates with different organizations in Canada and the U.S.
I have been a global ambassador for the Vascular Birthmark Foundation in the United States now for over 2 years. I've also been with a great organization here in Canada, About Face Canada, which is a facial differences organization.
Through her advocacy, she hopes to send a message to the community that birthmarks may not be contagious, but awareness and acceptance are.
Make people more comfortable with me. You know, they see me out shopping or they see someone like me with a facial difference. You know, come up, ask us the questions. We'd much rather, educate. I'd rather get down on a knee and chat with a little one. I love to do that, as opposed to being scared of me or worried that I have something infectious.
Sturge-Weber syndrome is a rare disorder, as only 1 in 50,000 people are born with the condition. Pete adds that there are currently no facial differences organizations in Lethbridge yet. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Thanks so much, Naveen. Up next, summer is a time when many decide to make a move. Well, we'll tell you how to spot a fraudulent moving company. Stay with us. That's next.
They'll do all their work by a laptop between the 2 seats in their cargo van. There's always a sense of urgency. They want the deposit right away.
Well, the spring and summer months are typically the busiest time for those arranging to move their household belongings to a new home. Many of us hire a moving company to make things a little bit easier, but unfortunately, sometimes we run into unscrupulous operators that are ready to take advantage of consumers who are under stress. Joining us today to offer some advice on how to avoid these kinds of troubles is Ron Riemann, Marketplace Trust Representative with the Southern Alberta branch of the Better Business Bureau. Ron, welcome to the show. Good to have you on today.
Thanks for having me, Jeanette. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, Ron, is it extremely rare for people to run into mover fraud in Alberta, or does this happen more often than we think it does?
Unfortunately, May is a busy month for the Better Business Bureau, and a lot of times this can be avoided in terms of stress and turmoil for the impending move if the consumer does his or her own homework. And when I say that, research is the biggest thing that consumers can take away from their move. It could be a smooth ride, so to speak, or it could be a rough, bumpy ride.
Yeah, no kidding. So I'm curious as to how the fraud actually takes place. So I'm told that sometimes a mover can actually hold your belongings hostage, so to speak. So how does this happen?
Well, let's backtrack a little bit and let's say, for example, you're ready for your move. You make a phone call And because it's all about convenience, and unfortunately, the pandemic has left us sometimes to go that route for the phone call. The phone call is done within 15 or 20 minutes, but there's really a lot of holes in that within that conversation with the price, with how much you're being charged, day and time, location, all that stuff that's usually handled within a contract itself. So you make the move. And then what happens the day of, the movers show up to your door, and the move is by the movers. They don't have the signs, or it's a blank information on the truck. And also there's also movers that are not licensed nor experienced. So they ask for a deposit up front, which I can get to that in a little bit later. So your move is now being taken care of by this company who's got your belongings, and now they're off to go to your destination. When you arrive at the destination, however, there seems to be a snag, because either they want more money, and they're not going to release the items that you've got in your vehicle. And unfortunately, they can do it two ways. You either have to pay them, or you have to get them in storage where they're going to dump off the stuff. So I guess the whole summary to this explanation I'm trying to say is, call a reputable moving company and get three quotes. Get three quotes from them, because there are a lot of really, really good moving companies out there who will come into your home, and they will actually do a virtual meeting with you to talk and discuss. And they're very good. They're very good at what they do. And spend the extra few dollars to get the move done right.
Yeah, the idea of having your furniture held hostage is kind of terrifying a little bit.
Very terrifying. It is very terrifying. It certainly is.
Yeah. Now, another way that fraudulent moving companies try to take advantage, from what we've been told, is to try to avoid that written contract that you were just talking about. So what are the potential problems with this?
Well, first off, let's go back to the deposit itself. Reputable companies will not charge anything up front. If they do, it's a very, very, very small fee. If you get moving companies that charge 25%, I'm leery about that. Certainly anything more than 50%, you have zero control at that point. You have no control. And in fact, if you do want to make sure that you do have the information, a paper trail of the deposit, make sure it's through the credit card company, so that you can always go back and see if you can dispute that. But getting back to the reputable companies, they won't charge a deposit. They'll ask for the money at the end of the delivery. And a lot of times, everything is detailed out in the contract. If it's a local move, it's based on an hourly thing. If it's a long-term move, you have to kind of like scope it out over a long period of time, and it's based on weight distribution. So there's a calculation that the moving companies do in regards to that. Make your move a lot simpler by having them talk about items that you're going to take yourself, as opposed to letting the moving company touch them. And we recommend that if there's some things that you feel you just don't feel comfortable with moving companies touch them, by all means take them with you. But for the most part, moving companies have a really, really good plan in place in making sure that the contract is rock solid.
Right. Sounds good. Now, we were talking a little bit, maybe talk a little bit more about these fly-by-night movers, and you'd mentioned these people that just kind of show up with an unmarked rental truck rather than a clearly marked company-owned fleet truck. That should raise big red flags, right?
There's always a red flag when you deal with something like this. You're right. It's an unmarked van. They'll do all their work by a laptop between the two seats in their cargo van. There's always a sense of urgency. They want the deposit right away. And because moving deals with a limited window of time, and there is a sense of urgency on the consumer's part, it's attractive to the consumer to say, hey, this person is going to get me out of a jam, and this person is going to make sure that my move is going to be run smoothly. And that's not always the case, obviously. Again, the deposit's going to be very high. You've lost zero control at that point. and sometimes the move will not be perfect. You'll probably get a lot of bumps and bruises with your furniture. Again, it could be held hostage because they'll want more money because, well, we thought the weight amount was going to be this, when in fact it's actually this, so we need a little bit more money. And if there's no contract to state that, it's just one person's word against another, and then you're on the hook for an extra unfortunately, few $1,000s at that case. So
yeah, so just watch for those sketchy business practices, right?
it's always important to make sure that you get insurance. And talk to your policy owner, policy insurance holder. Maybe they can help you and say, what sort of coverage do I have? It's always good to know that reputable moving companies have their basic insurance as part of the move. We recommend that if you can afford it, get some extra insurance. And so it's kind of like rock solid if something is busted or broken, or it's probably not, it failed to be part of the trip, or it's good to have the insurance. So certainly having insurance is really important. And again, insurance companies of your own will have that, but talk to the reputable companies. They'll have the insurance coverage for you as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice to get that moving insurance. So, of course, you'd mentioned there are many reputable moving companies across Lethbridge and across the province and, of course, the country as well. But then, then you get these bad guys that they'll attempt to represent themselves as one of these reputable companies. How does this even happen?
It's pretty darn easy, Jeanette, to actually start up a business, and you've got a cargo van, you've got 2-3 guys that are willing to move a lot of stuff, come up with a great website. You can claim to be a member of the Better Business Bureau or the Canadian Association of Movers. You can actually say whatever you want to say on your website. And that's where the stickiness comes into play, because at that point, we tell consumers, well, all websites are not, I shouldn't say all, I should say some websites need a little bit more homework. And that's where we come into play, the Better Business Bureau, in association with the Canadian Association of Movers. They have a great directory, and we have a great plethora of information about businesses that are they local? Do they have insurance? Is there a physical location? Will I know for sure that when the van shows up the morning of, it's going to have the company information on the side of the vehicle? Are these professional movers? Are they trained to move big or small jobs? So you read all the stories, you see all the stories as well. And one of the big things when a lot of consumers who are frauded by moving companies wish they could take back was that they had done their homework earlier. They did a little bit more research. Research is the most important key through this whole thing.
Absolutely. Now, apparently some of these companies will actually use fake Google reviews. So is there a way to spot that?
We noticed that if you see a dozen to 24 reviews, and they seem to have a bit of a trend that there's always 5 stars, and it seems to be worded the same way, it's a fake review. Most companies would like to think that they're always going to get 5 stars, and most reputable companies will always have that 5-star review. But if you get the odd 1 or 2 or 3-star review mixed in too, then you know that there's a little bit of credibility in the reviews itself. But notice the wording in the review itself: 5 stars all the time. And that if it's the same explanation or it's the same amount of wordage in that review, then it's not always a true review in itself.
Mm-hmm. Now, you had mentioned that people can contact the Better Business Bureau, or of course the Canadian Association of Movers member directly to check out your mover first. So how do people do that? Where can they go for that?
Certainly, they can come to our website at bbb.org, and we can help you with information about any mover in the Southern Alberta and East Kootenays region, and we can help you with that. And we can tell you if they're licensed. We can tell you how long they've been in operation. We can tell you their letter grade. We can tell you if there's any complaints, and we can tell you if they're going to get the job done from the information that's on their business profile on our our website. The Canadian Association of Movers has a wonderful directory where you can touch base with their website, and you'll know that these businesses are members of this actual mover site, Canadian Association of Movers, and they pay a fee. And so these are reputable, very good movers that are on this website here, and they can actually go to the Canadian Association of Movers website. I don't have their website information offhand, but if you just type it in the search bar, you'll be able to find it.
Awesome. Yeah. Now, if you do have a bad experience with a moving company, how can you actually go about filing a complaint?
With a complaint against the moving company itself, you have 60 days to file a claim against the moving company. If you feel you want to take it to the next level, so to speak, you can contact us at the Better Business Bureau, again, bbb.org. If you feel that you're justified and to file a complaint and you feel you've got no resolution from the moving company itself, then we encourage you to go to our website. And again, if it's also with a reputable mover within the Canadian Association of Movers, or if you want to talk to them for that matter, go talk to them as well. They'll be able to help you too. And we want to help as much as we can to make your move really smooth.
Awesome. So any last piece of advice for those who live in Lethbridge? Well, especially because we're so windy here, right? So maybe strap down your stuff if you're moving in an open trailer, or so it doesn't blow away in our crazy winds.
You hit the nail right on the head,
Yeah.
Jeanette. That's exactly right, to make sure everything is strapped down and make sure that you know exactly what you've got on your contract, have everything detailed out. Wouldn't it be a bad idea to actually take some pictures of some of the stuff that is going in that impending move? And then you've got some video information as well. Have an itemized list, give a copy of that list to the mover, exactly, and they'll have a copy of it. Don't forget about the insurance, that's always important. And make sure it's, again, a reputable company. Pay the extra little bit of money to get the move done right. And there's certainly a lot of great companies out there. Do your homework, get 3 quotes, and you'll be surprised how stress-free your move will actually be.
Awesome. That is a great piece of advice. Thanks so much, Ron, for being with us today. Ron Riemann is the Marketplace Trust Representative with the Southern Alberta branch of the Better Business Bureau.
Thanks, Jeanette. I've enjoyed it. Thank you again.
Well, many of us love animals and have pets at home, but sometimes we may have more questions than answers as to how to care for them. Joining us today is Dr. Ian Gibson. He is a veterinarian with Ranch Docs Veterinary Services located just outside of Lethbridge. Welcome to Bridge City News, Dr. Gibson. So good to have you on today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being with you guys.
We all like to spoil our pets since they are members of our families, and I'll bet a lot of us actually overfeed them. So how can you tell if they're being fed too much? What kinds of problems does this cause? And what advice do you have for pet owners to stick to the right amount of food?
Yes, I mean, obesity is probably one of the most common medical conditions we see with pets. And I mean, rightfully so. It's not always easy to know exactly how much you need to feed your pet because they're not able to tell you. But the main thing you need to look at is, the condition that your pet is in. We generally say if you sort of rub on the side of their chest, you kind of want to feel the ribs if you press firmly. And that sort of gives you an idea if your pet is in a good condition. The easiest way really is to feed your animal a good quality dry food, and most of those manufacturers will actually have some sort of description on the back of the bag, and that'll sort of tell you exactly how much you need to feed your pet per day. It gets a little bit more tricky if you're feeding, table food and things, because then, it's hard to quantify how much calories are in there. And then you might have to use a bit of common sense to sort of gauge how much you should give.
Okay, any advice on what ingredients to look for in cat food or dog food to make sure that they're getting good nutrition?
Once again, the manufacturers that make these foods, they're the scientists and they come up with a balanced sort of diet. I would say, a good quality veterinary approved diet. So meaning a vet has sort of looked over the ingredients, and nutritionists have looked at the ingredients and they've deemed it sort of balanced. That's what I would recommend. There
Okay.
has been there's been a slight trend in recent years to feed grain-free food, um, but there's actually a substantial amount of studies that now show that these grain-free diets are actually bad for dogs and it can lead to heart disease. So that's just something to bear in mind.
Definitely. Now, we hear differing opinions on how many times per day to feed your cat or dog. So, what is the correct answer on that one?
Most of the time, twice a day is fine, in the morning and in the evening. If you've got a little puppy and he's just a couple of weeks old, you might be better off feeding like 3 times a day. In saying that, a majority of dogs also do fine on once a day. There's not a real exact answer. It doesn't matter too much.
Okay, interesting. So, how often should pets go for a checkup at the vet?
We would definitely recommend an annual checkup at least, and that's often accompanied by, vaccinations, deworming tablets, etc. If your animal is sort of towards the later years in their lives, every 6 months might even be a good idea. Things change a lot in animals. They don't live as long, so often things change quickly. So, yeah.
So, every 6 months as the animal gets older?
Yeah, maybe towards the latter part of the life, in a dog, maybe anything upwards of 8 years. In a cat, maybe upwards of 12 years. You probably want to go for 6 monthly checkups.
Okay, interesting. Now, can you explain a little bit about parasites? What are they and how do they affect your pet? And how can we recognize it if our pet has them?
So we've got sort of two groups, external parasites, which we kind of already touched on. That's your ticks and your fleas. And then internal parasites are going to be intestinal worms mainly. And your pet can pick that up from just going to the park and sniffing around and licking things. They can pick up eggs, and the worms can actually develop in their digestive tract. So that's why we recommend, especially in the summer, to do maybe 2 dewormings. In the winter, you might be okay with just one or so.
Okay. How, in what way do they affect your pet? Does the pet act differently at all? How can you tell if he has it?
Sometimes a little bit hard to know.
Yeah.
Once the infestation gets really bad, you might see things like diarrhea, as the worms irritate the inside of the gut lining. And some worms actually suck the blood out of the pets, and they can sort of get anemic, so get a little bit weaker. Yeah.
Okay, so keep an eye out for that, definitely.
Yeah, hopefully we don't get to that stage.
Yeah, for sure. No, so what are the best types of treatments for these parasites? And is there a certain time of year that they come out, or are they just present all the time? It could be at any point.
Mainly in the warmer months. The warmer months from now on, for October, that's sort of the main time that they'll be active. So you definitely want to worm your pet, probably twice during these warmer months.
Wow. Okay. Now, what about vaccinations? How important are they?
Well, they're very important and quite topical in this day and age with us dealing with our own viruses. Yeah, we recommend annual vaccinations, and then as the patients sort of get a little bit older, some of these vaccines can last for up to 3 years. We do rabies vaccinations, and then there's a parvo vaccine, and also a kennel cough vaccine for dogs. And then the cats also have their own specific vaccine.
All right. Okay. Talk to us a little bit about spaying or neutering your pet. How important is this?
Well, we all know that, all the shelters are overrun with dogs waiting for homes. So,
Yeah.
the general recommendation, we feel like there's probably enough animals around. So that's one of the sort of reasons why you'd want to spay your animal. There's also sort of health benefits to doing that, especially sort of later in life. You know, Animals often get issues towards the older years. If they're intact, infections in their uterus, they can get prostate issues. So there are some benefits with regards to longevity, which makes sense to
Oh,
to spay your
that's
animal.
that's really interesting. What would the cost be for getting this done?
It really varies from clinic to clinic. Dog spay might be a couple $100, and cat operations are generally a little bit less because they're a little bit easier, I guess.
Right. Now, I mean, sometimes we think of our pets as our kids. So if we are parents, we all know we need to spend time with our kids. So what about time with our pets? Does spending time with our pets improve their health?
Well, we definitely know that it improves our health, but absolutely, spending good quality time with your pet at least once a day is essential. They suffer from boredom, they suffer from loneliness, and a lot of behavioral issues that develop is just due to lack of attention. They are social animals. My advice would be, rather than regarding you sitting on the couch watching TV with your pet for 4 hours, as much as you feel like you're spending time with them, they will benefit more from it if you actually spend maybe 30 minutes a day of quality time where you're absolutely dedicated to them, possibly doing training exercises or going for a walk where you're just focused on them. That's been shown to be sort of more beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. Can animals develop habits over boredom, like overeating, for example?
Um, They can, if that's the only thing they can keep themselves busy with is eating, they might go down that track. Some of them develop other vices like chewing your fancy shoes or doing other things that you might not find helpful. So, occupying them with things that you'd like them to be entertained with is a good idea.
Absolutely. We have a cat who's constantly sitting at the food dish meowing at us, letting her, like, we're like, well, there's no way she could still be hungry. So we're just thinking she's eating out of boredom, kind of almost like a human trait, right?
It could be, yeah. So I mean, you could always get a few little toys. Cats like little feathers and things and they love chasing things. So there's a bunch of things you could probably try to keep her entertained.
Like, any advice for people who have to leave their pet at home alone all day?
Yeah, so that's a challenging, aspect of owning a pet. Most people have to go to work. When you have a young animal, so a puppy or a kitten, they often can't deal with that separation early on in their lives, and it's important to note that, and actually try maybe go home at lunchtime, spend a bit of time with a puppy, and that way they don't develop this sort of anxiety of being alone. And towards, once they mature, they're probably okay to spend the day at home, alone. But you just don't want them to sort of develop this absolute separation anxiety every time you leave. So there's a little bit of training involved with that.
Yeah, absolutely. They're like little children in so many aspects, aren't they?
Very much so.
Now, what advice or precautions do you have for anyone who wants to go to the animal shelter and get a cat or dog for their child?
Yeah, so that's definitely the first place I would go and look. Those dogs are really waiting for a home, and there's so much of them that really deserve a home. In saying that, if you're getting a pet for your child, and there's some other sort of considerations you want to take into account, depending on how small your child is. A very boisterous dog might be too much for a little baby, and you might want sort of a more of a gentler pet. Um, so I would probably recommend going to the shelter and maybe spending a day there with whatever animal you're interested in, going home, thinking about it, and then maybe going again and visiting it again. And it's a very big investment. You're going to be having this pet in your household for the next 10, 15 years. So you really want to make sure you pick the right one. So maybe a little bit of patience before making that final decision. But yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, and I've often heard that it's not a good idea necessarily to buy an animal at Christmas time. I think the shelters are kind of saying that that's a no-no. Why is that?
I think it's, when people get an animal when emotions are at play, it's much same when you sort of overrun and you buy a new Harley Davidson, and then a week later you don't really want it anymore. So I think that's important for owners to realize there's a large sort of sense of responsibility when you actually get an animal, and they're going to form part of your life. You know, a cat can live up to 20 years, and dogs can live up to 15 years. So you almost have to think years in advance. Am I still going to have the time? Am I still going to have the finances to look after this little fur baby? Yeah.
Yes, good point. Think long term with that. Any advice if you have a newborn in the house? I had heard that newborn babies, and it might not be safe to have a cat near them. Any advice on that?
It really depends on the cat. You know, some cats can really play rough, and they might scratch the baby, not out of bad intentions, but just playing. But you also get lots of cats, the most gentle giants, and they'll be fine with a little baby. I don't think there's any health issues besides maybe.
Maybe it was an old wives' tale. I had heard that cats like to maybe lay across them because of the warmth and it could suffocate them. So,
Not that I've heard.
all right. Well, it looks like we are out of time, but thanks so much for being with us today, Dr. Gibson.
No, it's a pleasure. It was good chatting to you guys.
Thank you. Dr. Ian Gibson is a veterinarian with Ranch Docs Veterinary Services located just outside of Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.